Yes. Hi. Yes. Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's so great to meet you all. My name is Asel. I am from Kyrgyzstan, currently living in Italy, and I have worked for UNHCR 10 years before deciding to resign, and that was during the pandemic of 2020. And the reason why I decided to resign was because I think there are really three things. So one is that I wanted to live my life without permissions anymore, permissions of how much to earn, who to help, how to help, what kind of impact to make. And the other one was really looking at how else is possible to live if it's not with UNHCR. And the third one is really enjoy the freedom that I wanted to have. And I thought if I don't do it now, I will never do it. So that's why I decided to do that. And then as of last year, I started pursuing my passion of being a coach, helping humanitarians make decisions in their lives, especially in transitioning. So great to be here. And Vicky, floor is
Thank you
yours.
very much. Thank you, Asel, and thank you, Helen and Sebastian, for really giving us the floor. So my name is my full official name is Viktoria Hobinkova, but as you will see, I abbreviate my name as Vicky Hobinka because that's how I feel closer connected to who I am. But both of the names are my names, my name. I worked in the humanitarian sector with ICRC for almost 16 years, and before I worked with a few years with UNHCR. And just like Asel, it was for me, it was a dream come true when I started to work. And my specialization was, of course, in the Middle East. And so for many years, it was a dream come true, and I really loved it. And I gave all my heart and all my life to that, and all my private life as well. But of course, several years into that, I started noticing that, well, there are lots of elements in my life that are missing, that it's not really sustainable the way I am living, and like it's like what is my vision for the future? So really gradually, and it took me a long time, I must say, because for a long time I didn't have any guidance, and it took me a long time to find a coach that actually I started working with, to really clarify the questions of where do I want to be in my life? Am I only a humanitarian? What other life is possible for me? And how else can I serve? Because for many of us, the humanitarians, the act of really wanting to serve and be there for people is very present. And so I knew that I wasn't never going to join a corporate world or some other world, not that there is anything wrong with them, but I had this deep call. So I really, throughout many years, I explored of how to really live my life. And I left ICRC really during pandemic. I even moved during pandemic back to Slovakia, where I'm currently based. And I moved back to my home country after literally living 20 years abroad. And it was a really phenomenal decision that I'm very happy I have taken, very much contrary to most of the popular movements. So that's just very shortly about myself. And maybe if you allow me, the reason why we started working with Asel on the subject is that just like ourselves, we also noted a lot of colleagues in a lot of aid professionals in the aid sector struggling with the question of, you know, I am here, I'm an aid worker, but maybe this lifestyle doesn't suit me any longer. Maybe I want to leave. Maybe there is something else that this life doesn't fit me anymore. This work has been interesting, but I wanna do something else. And this is why, and we've noted that with so many aid professionals, there is this gap between, or there is this somehow, I will not say abandonment, but emptiness between I am an aid worker and what is on the other hand, who am I trying to become? And we've noticed that there is not enough support on that. I have personally also carried out a research, a very small research, and I've noted that even though most of humanitarians somehow figured their way through these transitions of finding a new job, and finding a new lifestyle and finding a new identity, because really because leaving the aid sector is not only changing lifestyle, it's really changing your identity, or adding another identity on the top of you being humanitarian. I realized that everybody was telling me it has been such a lonely journey. I have been so alone, and some of the people connected to other humanitarians transitioning. So we realized that there is such a gap and there is so much that is to be done. So that's really the reason we really wanted to talk about that. And maybe Asel, if you want to.
Yeah, so let me continue with the outlining of today's webinar so that you understand where we are and how we're doing things. So the outline is something that we thought would be helpful for you to follow along with us by answering questions that we pose in your own reflections, right? So that it's not then a waste of time. So you will have something out of this webinar. And the way that we would love for you to reflect is in this way. So we will be using the analogy of Google Maps, if you will. So we will first talk about where we are and specifically why are we wanting to transition. Then we will go to talk about after the transitioning as to how do we know that we have transitioned and how do we know that it's successful, right? Because we oftentimes worry that the reason why we're not transitioning is because it won't be as successful as our previous careers. So that's why it's important that we talk about before and after picture, which I think many humanitarians also like to talk about even in our humanitarian life. So that's what we're going to do. And the third part is where we will be talking about the process of transitioning. Because we all know and recognize, like Vicky was saying, that it's not something that we do overnight usually, especially if it comes to the identity shift, especially if it comes to mindset shift. So that's why how we want that process to be specifically. And then the last part that we'll be talking about, the tools that you can use for yourself in your own reflections, in your own journey of decision making, whatever the way you decide. So you can, also ask us questions after this, specifically on each of the parts if anything is not clear. You can also reflect throughout, as I said, or you can also listen to this, but keep the structure in mind, which may help you make things a bit like less chaotic and more structured for you then to not to be having a lot of drama as to, oh, I'm confused or overwhelmed and I don't know how and all of this, because I know that whenever we're thinking of transitioning, there will be a lot of those questions coming up. So therefore, our goal is to make your thinking process as structured as possible, if it makes sense, right? So that's why keep this structure in mind and we will answer any of your questions in the end. So let's start then discussing the defining what we mean by transitioning, because I think that's key so that we all have the same understanding. So Vicky.
Yeah, I don't seem to be able to go to the next slide. Don't know what is the issue, but let me just make it smaller. I don't know, I will do it like this. But not to, so what are humanitarian transitions? And forgive me for this, where is this slideshow?
Go to view and
yes,
slideshow. Yeah.
So I don't know why is it like that, but hopefully it won't be. No, okay, it was just stuck. I apologize. So as I've already mentioned, when we talk about transitions from humanitarian sector to other life, it's a very complex issue. And when we talk about humanitarian transitions, it's, as we've mentioned, it's not only changing a job. Usually, and even from the research I carried out, finding a new job or new calling. A lot of people already know what they would be doing. Some people are going through the process of trying to understand what is it that they would like to be going. That's usually the easier part. The really complex part is adapting the identity, the really exploring, because the identity of the aid worker is so omnipresent, is so very strong in all of us, is that very often there is already the first level, I would say, resistance, is that, oh, but I am a humanitarian, and that's who I am. And of course, and that can be a very strong identity, but there are loads of different identities that one has, right? There is identity of a mother, there is identity of I don't know, a dancer, a fisherman, so loads of different identities that we carry with ourselves that maybe have not had the opportunity to come out, so or to be explored. So I think this is one of the very strong messages that we wanted to say, that think about humanitarian transition not only as finding a new job, you are also adjusting your lifestyle, you are also exploring other identities, and you are really moving into a whole different life when you really want a transition out of the aid sector.
Yeah, maybe one thing to add to that is that also in contrast, things become a lot more clear, and the contrast would be what is transition not, right? So what we're not going to be talking about, I think, is that we will not be obviously advocating for you all to leave humanitarian sector if you don't want to, right? So that's not the goal. And in fact, the opposite might be true, because I've seen from many of my colleagues that oftentimes there is a reason why we want to transition is because of a person that we don't like, or because of a person that we have difficulty working with, and therefore we want to somehow get away from. There are also other instances where we don't really like the system. So our goal is to help you transition in your mind to the life you want. Whether then you change the external circumstance or not is totally optional. In other ways to look at it is, we would love to help you get to a level where you have the full freedom to say, I could transition and go somewhere else, or I could also stay where I am and continue feeling good about what I do and keep doing the work you want to do, right? So it would be great that we always feel like we have the choice to leave or not leave, rather than I have to leave because I don't see any other option, right? So that's why please consider this as an opportunity for you to also look at, if you didn't leave your job where you are now, if you wanted to, or if you wanted to stay, how else could you be transitioning in your mindset? And this could be a great opportunity to reflect. Okay, having said that, so let's dive into the nitty-gritties a little bit, so that you start reflecting on your own journey as well. And let's start with the before picture. And there could be many things that we could talk about in the before picture, but I would love for us to focus on the why question, because I think that's ultimately deciding or defining what it is that we're wanting and not wanting. So the simple question of why you want to transition could be a great starting point. And probably you already know the answer to that question. And probably some of the time we know the answer, but we don't want to accept the answer, or we don't want to own the answer because it's hard, right? And that's okay, but it's important that we start the journey with very honest reflection within our own inner world to ask ourselves what that is. So oftentimes we hear the answers that people have, and including ourselves, I guess, as well, is that the reason why we want to transition is because we are too stressed and overwhelmed, and we don't want to do this, or we don't want to be leading this type of life, or we always need to rotate in different countries, or we always need to be working in countries where the situation is not safe, right? These could be some of the reasons. Other reasons could be that simply we want to do something else, and that's also amazing, because we've done this for so long and we want to know what else is out there. Some of us also maybe we're wanting to just have a family, or starting some other relationship, or returning to relationships that we might have been neglecting in the past and prioritizing humanitarian work. So whatever the reason is, write them down. I mean, it helps for me at least, and I would always recommend people write them down. And the reason why we want to be very clear on this is several reasons, I would say. So one of the biggest, obviously, is being clear on why or what your reasons are for leaving the humanitarian world or having this desire. The other reason why we want to ask this question is so that we realize what are our likes and dislikes, or what are our priorities in life, what are the values that we want to pursue that we might not have been doing so far, or simply put, we want to be living the life that we want instead of trying to survive, or instead of keep reacting to the outside world in the place where we are, right? So that's why oftentimes humanitarians that I meet also tell me that, well, I would like to leave, but I don't really know what else to do outside of it because that's the only thing I know. And the why question could also inform that. And we could actually start from the opposite of what are the things I don't want to be doing anymore. And that could also help us inform as to what is it that we're wanting to do, right? Because sometimes it might be what we want is not really open, and we need to dig a little to get to that answer. So whatever the answer is, without any filter, without any judgment, just put it out there. Even if something that you don't want to recognize or own, it's fine. You're doing it for your own sake within your own internal world. So that's why just answer that as honestly as possible. You can have as many answers as possible or as one as possible. And also, sometimes you can also just say, I just want to, right? You don't need to have a reason or justification why you do it. You can just want to, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So anything to add, Vicky, on this?
Yeah, thank you. Just for me to add is that there are no good or bad reasons. All reasons are valid. And as Asel said, it's just important that you're honest with yourself and write them all down. The reasons why will answer to what is it that I want to be doing in my life afterwards, if this is not clear for you yet, because for some it's not really clear. And I would like to also maybe, if it's okay, just mention a few, because I have done, as I mentioned, a small research, and I'll just leave with you that, you know, all the people that I have interviewed, they say that it's never one reason. It's always a set of reasons, a combination of reasons, a private and professional reasons. So I will let you read. I felt I got as far as I could. I have done it. I was in my mid-40s. So really just the lack of motivation, just really felt that was a stagnation and there was no light. There were other reasons underneath. Is a gentleman who had family. So he says for him, several reasons, private reasons, need for stability, future for my kids, etc. So there's but if I show you all what I collected, it's really people have all sorts of very diverse reasons. So it's really, don't be ashamed to really just think deep for yourself and write all the reasons that you have for yourself, because this is a really very important process to understand.
Yes, so now we go to the after part, and like we were using the analogy of Google Maps, which I love, is obviously if we don't know where we're going, it's difficult to go there. The common sense would dictate, even though everyone's journey is different, so you can try all the different ways. But one of the things that I notice a lot of humanitarians struggle with is that many of us tend to be vague. And by vague, I mean is that I want something else, or I want something great and big, but we are not specific enough. So that's why I would love to encourage you to be specific enough to ask yourself, how do you know that when you have achieved whatever the indicator you may have, you know that you have done it, that you know that you have made it? Just like the way that you entered the humanitarian world, you probably really wanted to get into it and you tried lots of different ways and you got into it and you know that you've made it, right? So that's why we want to be specific as to what is your definition of success, whatever that means, and how do you know that you have transitioned. Now, the reason why we want to ask that, as I said, to be clear on what it is, and also what's very important to notice is that oftentimes during the process, our brain may want to say things like, well, it's not working. well, this is not what we're supposed to be doing. Look how unsuccessful I am. Look how everyone else is going and getting promotions and careers and I'm behind, right? So whatever it is that our brains tend to do that, and it's normal. So these are the moments where we show our brain our definition of what we mean by success, or the transitioned version, so that our brain has a bit of the answer, so that we don't freak out over in the process of not working or working. So the other thing that I would love for you to consider in this after transition is sometimes our brains want to limit ourselves in saying, well, I can only do this, or I can only do that because of the past, right? So because our brains get very past focused of what's possible. And even if we're desiring something else, but our brains might be pulling us backwards and saying, well, but we can't really. Like oftentimes, I think the example I hear is that, well, I'm a humanitarian, I can never be an entrepreneur, even though I would like to, but that's not for me because I can't even count the money. And that's me currently. I am the entrepreneur who can't count money, but here I am replicating my UN salary. So all I'm saying is that if you have a desire, put it there. Even if currently you think it's not possible, even if you think your brain is like judging you and saying, well, how ridiculous you are, it's okay. You can still put it on the paper. We will deal with the rest later. And the other, maybe the little bit of the advice, if I may give, is that allow yourself to visualize the best scenario, right? So like in addition to what I was saying about not limiting yourself, but not limiting and allowing yourself to have all the fantasies or dreams, there might be several steps. So that's why allow yourself finally think for yourself, what is it actually I want? So one of the famous phrases that sticks with me from my client, she says that finally I want to live a life where I don't need to be catching up on things. Right? And she feels like she was always, like in her 40s now, always catching up on things, on the family events, on the family life and everything else. And she says, I want to live a life that's proactive. And whatever the definition of it, right? So that's why put everything that you think is useful for you to define what it is that you want after the transition. Vicky, anything?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to touch on what you're mentioning, that when your brain is telling you or limiting you, this is bound to happen. I just want to really make it clear that every time, and I think you will know it, every time you're going out of your comfort zone, your brain will be trying to stop you, will be telling you, you will have voices in your head saying, oh, who do you think you are? And oh my God, you can never do this. Oh, this is just a nonsense. Don't even think of it. And that's absolutely normal reaction, because we are going out of it's even there is a scientific research. I won't go into that about it. So really, I just want you to develop sort of a mindfulness technique, mental fitness, whatever you believe is necessary for you, because these are the saboteurs that we call them saboteurs or limiting beliefs, whatever you wish to call them, that were useful for you when you were a child. They were useful for you to protect you from certain situations, but they stay with us, this sort of sabotaging, self-sabotaging thoughts. And some people have a lot of them. Some people, you ask them, they will have like every other minute. Some people have once a day, twice a day. So really know these saboteurs, get to know them, and just tell them, thank you very much. Don't discuss with them, because you will have these thoughts. It's inevitable. So I just prepare yourself for this.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of preparing yourself, now we're going to the third portion, which is the process, which is the main part. And the reason why it's main part is because we really want to define the road to get to where we want to go, right? So, and the road could have several options in it, or only one option, whichever is the way is most suitable for you. And the process, I'd love for people to start from the most difficult one. And the difficult one is the question of, why haven't you done it yet? right? If you are someone who have done it and didn't succeed in your mind, whichever way that you thought you would succeed, but you didn't and you return, you will have more data to work with. For those people who don't have that experience, you can of course start with the process of mind reflection, I guess, is just simply, right? So ask yourself this question of why haven't you done it yet? And this is where all the gems will come out. And some of them will be scary, and that's okay. So some of the ways that people may answer, and your answer may be different, obviously, but some of the ways that people answer that I thought I would, present it to you, and you will also see maybe some of them is somehow close to you. So reasons people say, obviously the biggest reason people say is fear. Right? Fear is underlying and manifesting itself in so many different ways. So one of the ways that fear manifests itself is confusion, overwhelm, stress, and we just don't want to deal with it because it's too unknown, like Vicky was saying. Right? So therefore, fear may come in the form of, well, I don't really have time for it. If I had time, I would be doing it. I don't have time for it, right? The other one might be, I don't really know where to start or how to go, like the confusion. I don't really know how to do it, right? That's like a very classic example when our brains just don't want to work on things, or our brains want to resist by saying, I don't know. The other one might be, I don't want to lose what I have already, which is also very legitimate. Some of the other examples that you hear is, I'm too old, too young, whatever the version of I am too something. I don't have enough, and you can put whatever the not enoughness, right? So I don't have enough information, I don't have enough resources, I don't have enough finances, whatever it is. And also, I don't know if I'm ready yet. So these are some of the examples that if they come up, and you may have maybe even other examples, and we would be very curious to know how your examples are or what your answers are to this question, right? So whenever we have these questions, what we really want to do is answer them. We don't want them floating around in our head unanswered. Now, the question is, how do we answer them? Because oftentimes our brain wants to answer like, well, yes, no, a bit like very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like tick the box answer, which comes to my mind, right? Like formal, or like not really reflective enough, not really in our advantage, but just like for the sake of getting rid of it. But that's not what we want, obviously. We want this to be a very reflective process so that we can make this journey as predictable and as fearless to the extent possible, as much as possible. So that's why it's important that we answer these questions from the mindset of curiosity, meaning, how would I, for instance, let's answer one of the questions. If your brain says, I don't have time to think about it, you could answer it from the mindset, if I had enough time, what would I work on it, right? And start working on it. Or so I don't have time, if it was just my mental construct, how would I work with it? How would I find time for it? Another question, for instance, if your brain says, I'm not ready, or I don't know if I'm ready for this, you could always ask yourself, how do you know if you're ready? Right? So be specific, as I said. So don't be like vague of, oh, I'm not ready. And I'm not in any way judging your answers. It's just my brain does it so often. And I'm just showing you how my brain usually reacts. So that's why whenever your brain says, I'm not ready, ask yourself what that ready means. Maybe ready means financially, right? It's absolutely legitimate. You need to think about it. Maybe ready means to prepare the family. Maybe ready means to talk to other people. Maybe ready means just having the feeling within that you are able to do this. So you can see that you can answer these questions from the curiosity mindset, or you can ask this question from the mindset of I will just get it over with. Don't choose the I will get it over with, because whatever the desire we have, whatever the wishes we have, we can deal with them one of two ways. Either we continue suppressing them, which will have heavy consequences for us, or we actually honor them and listen to them and find out what they're really trying to say, because those wishes and desires may not go away. And the only way we usually try to make them go away is by overwatching Netflix, or by over drinking things or overeating things, which is not the consequence we want. So that's why take yourself and your desires seriously, honor them by answering them also seriously. Vicky, anything you would
Thank you.
like
Yes,
to add?
I would like to actually go back a little bit to the process of transition, because I designed a few points that might be helpful for you to consider, sort of a guiding posts or components when you are entering the process of transition, on the top of course all these important considerations and thoughts you should be keeping in mind, that Asel just mentioned. So one of the most important components is mindset. I think we keep on alluding to that all the time. It's really your mindset and controlling your mindset. This is your most powerful weapon. And I think it's not only me that says that. Your mindset is your most powerful friend, or your biggest enemy, because all these thoughts, the negative thoughts, will keep on coming back, and also loads of questioning. The second thing is really, and we will be alluding to that as we go through some of the stereotypes that we'll be talking about, is have a plan. Have a plan to go to until certain area. It doesn't have to be a perfect plan. Obviously, it's not a plan that cannot change. It's not going to be written in stone. But I just would like to maybe use a metaphor that how often we write strategies for our operations, right? We write strategies, we write planning, but we rarely do it for ourselves, or actually we almost never do it for ourselves. So it's really your opportunity to write your own plan, your own strategy for your own transition. So that's really something that I would really encourage everyone to do, with indicators, exactly as Asel was already mentioning. And some of the and other things that we will be again alluding to as we go and talk about stereotypes that we often hear is really time. Give yourself time. Then finances, again, something we will be talking about, financial preparation, and create a support system. Support system, mindset and support system are one of the key elements of any transition. You need to have a support system that will not only support you in your thinking, support you emotionally, but really you'll be also accountable to, and there will be guide, they will be always there for you, because transition, it's not one thing, but it's transition is really every day. It's a systematic work. Every day you try to do something. So it's not about something large, but it's really showing up every day to do your piece, your part. And that's really the strategic thing. And then one of the last points is really habits. What kind of habits do you have? Do you have habits that are maybe not helpful for you? And this is, again, questions that you can ask yourself. What are the habits that are really not useful for me to be in my life, or to be really helping me through a transition, right? So this is very briefly.
Yeah. So when you will be answering all of this questions, I think the important thing that you need to know is that whatever the answer is, it all comes down to two things. It's trusting yourself and trusting your process, or your goal, or your desire, or your dream, whatever it is, trusting to make it work. And I have seen it so many times that as soon as we learn truly trust ourselves, our abilities, our really inner wisdom of being able to do way more than we give ourselves credit for, once we learn how to do that, then everything else becomes optional. Optional meaning you can decide to stay where you are and continue having an amazing time, or you can also decide to go somewhere and have an amazing life and having facing all those challenges, but you knowing that you know how to deal with them. Right. So that's why I think whenever you think of all the answers that you have, there will be a point when you keep asking yourself why that is and why this is, right? Why I don't have time. Because if you don't have time, it probably means also that you're not feeling like in charge. And if you're not feeling like in charge, it's likely that you might be blaming someone or yourself for not finding the time. And if you keep asking this line of thought of why I have this or why do I think this, you land in the end at the point of trusting yourself versus not trusting yourself. Now, the interesting question is that you can always ask yourself, that helps me tremendously, is why am I not trusting myself? Right? And whatever the answer is, that will be helping you also get over whatever the obstacles that you have. Because if you think about it, if you trust yourself enough and your goal enough, what are the things you would be doing already? How are the ways you would be already transitioning, or how are the ways you will be creating the life you want already, right? So think about it. And whenever you're not trusting yourself, it's likely that we have gone this like old programming that many of us may have, where we believe that things are not in our control, or whatever we create is not in our control, and we tend not to own what we have already created. We tend not to give so much credit to what we have already achieved. And I've seen it also with many humanitarians, even when they transition and decide to go somewhere else to find another job, they start with the mindset of, oh my God, I have to find a job. I hope I will find it. I hope someone will pay me. Or many examples I often hear from, especially Europeans I see and Americans, is that they say, well, back home, no one will really take my experience seriously, or no one will really give me the job I want with this level of pay because there's so much competition and I will be just one of so many, right? So when we go to the job search with that mindset, imagine how difficult it will be, because we will be just proving our belief to be true. Because whatever the belief that we believe to be true about ourselves, about our lives, we always tend to repeat it. So that's why it's important that for you to recognize that if you trust yourself and your identity, whether a new one or additional one, whatever it is that you decide to create, if you trust that and you're willing to go through that, then the world is your oyster. It would be, I don't know, an understatement. So it's just for you to, I guess, be having it in your awareness, so that when you have this reflection on answering all of those questions, you can also answer it from the lens of, if you trusted yourself, how would you answer this, right? If you trusted yourself that you find time, how would you find time? And the last point maybe on the trust is, I find for myself, at least from my own experience of so many years, trust is a choice. And oftentimes I think we believe that trust is something that we develop for over a long time. It's arduous and difficult and but what if it's not the case? What if trust is something that we choose? And the famous example that I always think of it in my own head, at least, is that imagine someone came to you and said, your spouse is cheating on you. How would you react? You have two ways. Either you go after the spouse and start shouting at him or her and saying, how could you? Or you could say, well, I know my spouse. I know the personality. I know who that person is. I trust that person, right? You're choosing it in that moment, right? You have the choice of two roads, but you're choosing it.
Yeah.
And that's the choice that you can have already today if you decide to. Vicky, anything?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It all goes for me go back to the mindset, how important the mindset is. It's really your priority number one in anything in life, probably, but so specifically in transition. And really, what are the thoughts that you allow in your mind? What are the thoughts that you leave them and say they are good? And it's all linked to vision, and it's all linked to really how you design your life. So if you allow me now, I would like to maybe just, because for the sake of time, we won't be able to do all, but we just picked up a few of the stereotypes that we keep hearing. As Asel already mentioned, I don't think I'll ever find the same level of motivation. I don't think I'll ever have enough. I don't think I'll earn enough. And one of the very typical one is, I know what I want to leave a humanitarian sector, but I have no idea what else I could do. And here, some of the things that on the top of what we've already mentioned, some of the ways you can think about it, the easy way is really just write what are the things that you don't want in your life. What are the things already you cut loads of things from your life. You don't want family separation. You don't want to work extensive to be available 24/7. You don't want to put your life in danger and be in very dangerous situations. So also write all the things that you don't want. Write also all the things that are your non-negotiables, things that you really must have in your life, like, and don't negotiate with yourself. It's really what we see very often, and I think Asel, you talked about it a little bit, about what you trust and what you allow yourself. It's really all about this, because we see very often, I negotiate with myself, oh, if I have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But when you put your vision out there, put it as you really want it. Don't negotiate with yourself. Put it out there. The negotiations will happen anyhow outside, right? So you will be negotiating with your job and other things. So or a new employer. So at least with yourself, put really your vision, your deep belief of what you really want it to be. And also for people who really don't know what it is that they would like to be doing, it's really gentle exploration. We already talked about identity. We already talked about trying to understand what are the things that I really enjoy. So instead of maybe asking yourself, what kind of a job do I want? Because it's very specific. Zoom out a little bit. Zoom out and look at yourself. What is really the meaning of me being here? What is the thing? It can be an overwhelming question. It can be a big question, but it's a really crucial thing to ask and answer each for one of us, because each one of us was brought to this world for something, and it's so really define what is your life purpose. What is your purpose of being here? And life purpose is not something really specific. It's something very generic and can be very simple, right? For me, just to tell you, it's really bring clarity, vision, and peace to people's lives. And it can be in humanitarian world, it can be as a coach, it can be in something else. So really define in these generic terms, what is it that you came, and this will guide you further. And don't something that you will be aligned with. It will be aligned with your values, and you will feel, I will say, also a visceral physical alignment. Because very often, and I might experience it myself in my last year of humanitarian work, I physically felt misalignment with what I was doing. It was not necessarily because it was a bad job. It was a fantastic position, but it was no longer for me. I felt a really strong misalignment. So it's really very important to listen to ourselves, not only to our minds. And your mind is a very powerful friend potentially, but really to be, and we actually talked about this with Asel today, to also listen to how your body reacts. If you have like strong reaction to something, there is either clash with your purpose or clash with your core values. Is there something you would like to add here, Asel?
No, I think I just want to maybe also remind again that, whenever we say, I don't know something, it might be also that we just stop listening to ourselves for some time, and it's okay to take time to start listening again. And also it might be another way of fear manifesting itself or showing itself, where we don't go forward, but we just keep circling around this question of I don't know. So one of the ways that helps me to think about it is, if I knew, what would I do? Right? And that's always like something to move forward rather than staying where you are.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to go to another one very, very frequently used. I'm old to leave the aid sector. I think this is, I think we probably all of us might have said this to ourselves at one point. And really, I would like to, and here there is a meaning in words and meaning in trying to go deeper. It's too old for what? And here I would advise, if this is a sort of a very generic statement. So if you say, oh, I'm too old for this, what are you really too old for? Or presumably, of course, too old is, a very generic statement that is usually hides behind, there is something that is hiding behind it, but really break it down. Am I too old to start with a new group of people? Am I too old to really just start writing CVs and applying, or am I too old to start a journey of really integrating back in my society? So really there is always a much deeper meaning in trying to unpack what is it behind it, and very often, and what is the fear behind it. And Asel, you talked about it already wonderfully, about unpacking these things, but really to understand what is the fear trying to tell me. Because let me tell you also from my research, fear will be there. It will not be permanent. It will not be all the time. It will not be for everyone at the same time, but you will at some point feel fear, because you are going outside of the comfort zone, outside of anything that you have known. So this is absolutely normal. Doubts will be there. Everyone that I have interviewed has told me that there are doubts. Some people said, even now I have doubts, but I'm going because I have this vision and I have put this in place and I have the indicators, so I know where I'm going. So I think this is very important to mention. And also one thing that people forget when they think about I'm too old to leave the sector, or when they phrase, I don't even like to repeat it because it's somehow already sticking in the mind, but really people forget, our colleagues forget that there are great advantages in leaving the sector in your midlife. Let's say that you already know what you like, you already know what you don't like, you already have a lot of experience that you can transfer. And here that's another question, how to transfer this experience we have. And we know sometimes it's really struggle to translate what we've done to the sector, to where we are going, but it's absolutely doable. And also we have a huge support network, and sometimes we don't tap into these resources that we have sufficiently, because I have a friend, and a friend has a wife, and she works in the sector where I want to go. And it always, sometimes we say, oh, I don't know anyone. It starts with one contact. It starts with one name. And this is what I just want to go back to, really being systematic. Like if I have a dream, I have a vision of where I want to go, or then start working today. Don't wait for tomorrow. Start just one step, just one step.
And I think one of the ironies that I often notice is that whenever we have this, I don't have time, or I'm too old, these type of statements, which actually makes us not to move forward and therefore lose time, right? Or being busy with things that we don't want to be busy and therefore lose time. And you can see that we're actually doing the opposite of what we want, but we continue doing it because we believe that I'm too old or I don't have time. And the other thing that I want to add to this is that whenever we say that I'm too old, I see a lot of shame and guilt popping up with people, right? And I think we often forget that this is a judgment that we are making ourselves. Oftentimes it feels like everyone else is saying to us, or everyone else is saying that, well, Asel, you're too old for this, right? But actually, whenever we're thinking that, it's likely that we ourselves are thinking it, and we are shaming ourselves, and therefore difficult to handle the shame or the guilt, or whatever the guilt that we have for other people maybe, and therefore we don't tend to go forward to what we want, because we feel like we shouldn't be wanting this at this age, or we shouldn't be doing this at this age. And whenever we're telling ourselves I shouldn't, which also suggests the resistance of not being able to handle that shame. But the good news is that if we're producing that emotion, we also know how to handle it. And that goes to any emotion and any feeling that we experience, that they are produced by ourselves. And that also means that we know how to handle it, we know how to feel them. So the best way you can deal with it is start feeling it. Yes, Vicky, I think we might be running out of time. So
maybe one more. How do I prepare? How do we prepare? Or very quickly, and then just a sum up of contacts and all that. Yeah, would it be okay?
Exactly. So to wrap up basically of what we were saying. So look at where you are, look at where you are going, and decide on the process, right? So Vicky and I have talked about the process of looking at these specific beliefs, specific statements that your brain offers, look at them and answer them. And once you have answered all of that, then you will have gained some clarity as to what you want, what you don't want, and how you really like to do something new or continue where you are, but with a different mindset. Now, once you have all of that written out, then it's important, make a decision. Because if we don't decide on what to do next, all of these questions will continue bubbling in our mind and continue coming up, continue bothering us or knocking on our doors. And that's normal, and that's how we're designed, and that's good. So it's important that we decide whatever the decision you make. You can also make a decision that this is how I want to design my life in the humanitarian field. You can also say, this is how I want to do outside of it. It's totally up to you, but important that you make that decision and make the decision out of the possibilities of you being able to do it. Remember the trust factor. Make a decision out of trusting yourself, or ask yourself, if I trust myself, how would I make this decision? If I trusted that I can go through and make this journey work, how would I make this decision? And once you make that decision, start working on it already now. So one of the ways you could do that, you could, for instance, say that, well, I want to have more time for this and this priorities. Start making that time now. Start experimenting and practicing now, even without changing anything externally in terms of resigning from job or anything else. If your brain is very afraid about financial aspects, start saving it now and start showing, for instance, ask your brain, how much money is enough? Because oftentimes we get into the mindset of, oh, it's never enough, it's never this, it's never that. Don't do that to yourself. Be very specific and be very realistic, obviously, and add additional 10-20% that you will not have foreseen now. Add that and start saving for it. And once you start acting on all of your decisions, you will see what the next door is. Because I feel like after making decision, in order to see what the result could be, we need to act and see if we need to adjust or not, right? So that's what's important, that you start experimenting for yourself. This was from me. And maybe the last point that I didn't mention is that the way you know you are prepared for transitioning is, for me at least, this is the feeling. And I know that it sounds crazy in the world of analytics and everything, but the feeling is usually the signal that tells us which way to go. Yep. And if we have learned how to listen to ourselves, we will also know that we will have this tingling trust that says, yes, it's very scary, but I can do it. Yep. And this is the feeling that you could be watching out for.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just would like to maybe add that the attunement that is important, as we mentioned, with the mind and the body, and also maybe not waiting for something outside to happen. And I think you alluded to that, saying that let's start the first step. Let's not wait for something outside of me happen, because this way you are putting the agency you have to somewhere or someone outside of you. So don't expect that, oh, I will leave when I have a new job. Start now. It doesn't mean you have to leave your current job, but start doing something now. So maybe before we end, very quickly, just a few things not to do. We've already mentioned a few of them, but I think it would be useful to mention really very practical tips: not to underestimate time, not to underestimate finances, and maybe giving up after first time. it's one of the very frequent things that we see overall in life, not only in transition. Oh, I've tried once. Well, but as we know that when we are trying to perfect ourselves in something or improve ourselves something, when we learn something new, it's usually it often doesn't work on the first time. And I think with so many, and even from the research I carried out, it's definitely, I cannot say what is the percent of the people, but I would say probably at least 1/3 of people tried leaving once, they came back, and then again tried to leave with a better mindset, with a better equipped with information. Doesn't mean it will be your case, but just don't give up after the first time. Learn from the experience. Every experience we have is useful for us to learn from. So a little bit of a research. I mean, there is more, but just what I have collected. People that were in transition on average were 2.5 years, although it's very difficult to measure what is the beginning and end of the transition, of course. Overall, the people I talked to, there were about 36 people who underwent transition in the humanitarian sector. They were on average almost 12 years. About 1/3 of them retrained, meaning lots of people had a vision, they knew what they wanted, so they retrained to something new, just like we have, Asel and myself. Found new career, 70%, meaning different from what their aid sector was then, and returned to original job was 40%. So very often technical skills such as medical professionals, logisticians, and other professionals, where they chose to continue on the same path, but maybe in a different sector. So maybe if we may, just a few minutes before the break, maybe just mention for those people who will not be joining us for discussions and for questions and answers, we do have with Asel live sessions. It's 30 minutes every Thursday at 1 o'clock. Asel, do you want to say a little more about that?
Yeah, so the idea is that be very specific on these sessions to be answering any of the questions that you all might have as to what to do and how to deal with it, right? So oftentimes we talk about how to deal with certain emotions that come up, or how to deal with certain, what's the word I'm looking for, like attachments or fears, and how to deal with those. But also practically speaking, we interview people who have gone through it and how they have done it and what worked, what didn't work for them. So if you're interested, please come along or let us know, and we will try to address your question.
Yeah. And then questions we will have after the break, but again, for people who are maybe leaving, these are our contacts. If you have any questions, if you would like to experience being accompanied by a coach, or really any question that maybe you would like clarification on, write to me or to Asel. I will be happy to answer you.
Thanks a lot, Vicky and Asel, for this very interesting presentation. So as we said at the beginning of this webinar, we're going to have a 10 minutes break. So it's now 7:05. So let's come back at 7:15. I will not be there in the second part, but I give the hand to Sébastien and Christophe. And thanks a lot for being with us today. And this second part, of course, will not be recorded. Have a nice break and see you later.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.